Parshas Naso this week. We're still in Shavuos mode. We're not saying, as long as we're not saying Tachanun, people still feel Shavuos. But why don't we say Tachanun? Because when the Beis Hamikdash stood, Pesach and Sukkot and Shavuos, Shalosh Regalim, everybody had to go to the Beis Hamikdash for Aliyah L'Regel. And with your Aliyah L'Regel, you brought a korban Olas Re'iyah. The korban Ola, which was designated as a Re'iyah, you coming into the Beis Hamikdash, you bring a korban. And we talk about this korban every single morning. Elu dvorim she'ein lahem shir, hapeya, v'habikurim, v'harei ayom. What mitzvah is rei ayom? The mitzvah of re'iyah. So it's a machlekes thing, Gemara Chagiga, whether it means appearing in the Beis Hamikdash, unlimited, or it means the olas re'iyah. Okay? It's a sugin Chagiga, but the rei ayom is talking about re'iyah. And when Pesach and Sukkot came around, there wasn't a major issue. Millions of Jews came. Erev Pesach was a miracle in and of itself, right? But not everybody brought their own korban. There could be a chabura of 20 Jews on one korban Pesach. Everybody got a kezayis. If you have a little sheep or a little goat, you probably get, I don't know, 20, 40, 50 people. How big is a kezayis? You get 40, 50 people maybe on one korban. So how many korbanos had to be brought? I don't know, a lot, but it was a miracle. On Erev Pesach, they managed to shech the hundreds of thousands of animals. In a process that's detailed in Masechet Pesachim. But now you have a whole set of other korbanos. Everybody has to bring an Olas Re'iyah and Shalmei Chagiga. You have to bring a korban Shlomim. We all know the famous saying, Ein simcha ela b'basa v'yayin. There's no real simcha unless you have meat and wine. Ein simcha ela b'basa v'yayin is a halacha from the Beis Hamikdash. On Yontif, you're supposed to eat meat. There's a mitzvah of Simchas Yontif. In order to eat b'yoytze Simchas Yontif, you have to eat meat and drink wine. Okay, so we'll go to Hakas, we'll get some meat. You're not yoytze the mitzvah. In order to be yoytze the mitzvah of basar, you have to eat basar of kodshim. So when the Beis Hamikdash stood, every Jew brought shalmei chagiga, an olas re'iyah you can't eat, it's kulei lashem. Shalmei chagiga you can eat the meat, and you ate the meat, and you yoytze the simchas yontif because it's basar kodshim. Today, unfortunately, we can't get basar kodshim. It's a shem. We'll hear a siren. It won't be the siren of a rocket. It'll be the siren of Mashiach. We'll go to Yerushalayim and we'll eat basar kodshim today. But Nebuch, in the meantime, we can't eat basar kodshim. So how are you yoytze simchas yontif bisman hazeh? So there are all kinds of shittas. You go to the liquor store in the Merkaz, you buy a special bottle of wine, and you yoytze with yayin. Buying a nice article of clothing could be simchas yontif, etc. But the ikar simchas yontif is basar v'yayin. So Pesach, the korban Pesach was slaughtered Erev Pesach with miracles to get it all done. But now you have to bring Olas Re'iyah and Shalmei Chagiga. So according to Beis Hillel, you can bring these korbanos on Yontif. But Beis Shammai disagrees. But how do you slaughter all these korbanos? Olas Re'iyah and Shalmei Chagiga. The answer is that you're allowed to bring these two korbanos the whole Yontif, including Chol HaMoed. So the Beis Hamikdash was busy the whole Chol HaMoed. People bring Olas Re'iyah, Shalmei Chagiga, Olas Re'iyah, Shalmei, the whole Chol HaMoed. And the same thing is true for Sukkot. What do you do with Shavuos? It's one day. How does everybody get there? There's no korban Pesach, but everybody has to bring a Olas Re'iyah and Shalmei Chagiga. What do you do? So Gemara learns out that the same way that Pesach and Sukkot, we're going to leave out Shmini Atzeres for now. The same way that Pesach and Sukkot have Yontif and then 6 additional days where you can still bring the korban, Shavuos is like the other Yomim Tovim, and you have 6 days after Shavuos to still bring those karbanos. So all these days were days where karbanos were still being brought, L'Kavod Shavuos, and therefore because of that it's a Yontif, and we don't say Tachanun. The day after Shavuos, Isru Chag, is a separate discussion. That has to do with another reason that Isru Chag, we don't say Tachanun, and we call it Isru Chag. We don't call all 6 days after Shavuos Isru Chag. The kids would love that, another 6 days off. But we don't call all 6 days after Shavuos Isru Chag. We don't say Tachanun because the korban could be brought for 6 days. The only day we call Isru Chag is the day after, and that has its own special reason, and that's because in those years in the Beis HaMikdash, that Shavuos fell out on Shabbos. I'll tell you something interesting about that in a moment. I mentioned in the women's share this week, women were, and it's not the first time I mentioned this, but they were sort of dazzled by this whole idea. I will mention in a minute about Shavuos. But in the year in the Beis HaMikdash that Shavuos comes out on Shabbos, you can't bring your Olas Re'iyah and Shalmei Chagiga. You can only bring Olas Re'iyah, Shalmei Chagiga on Yontif. You can't bring it on Shabbos. The only things that could be shechted in the Beis HaMikdash on Shabbos are Karbonos Tzibur, public offerings. The daily Tamid in the morning and the daily Tamid in the afternoon. The Korban Musaf of Shabbos, these are public offerings. Somebody walks into the Beis HaMikdash and says, I have a Korban Shlomim I'd like to bring today. They say, come back tomorrow. We don't shech. What's the difference? So, if Mi'at Hashem, we should be Zoich. We're going to the Beis HaMikdash. Beis HaMikdash is a Davar Nifla. It's a whole building, the holiest place on earth, and Chil Shabbos is going on there the whole day. It's Chil Shabbos. They're slaughtering animals. They're taking the limbs of the animals. They're putting it on the fire, on the Mizbeach, and burning them on the fire. All this is mutter for a korban tzibur. But you cannot bring a personal korban into the Beis HaMikdash and have the kind of be Mechal Shabbos for a Yachid. That can't be done. Okay. So now you're in Beis HaMikdash, and Shavuos came out on Shabbos. No one can bring their Oilis Re'iyah and Shalmei Chagiga. It had to be done Sunday. That's where we get Isru Chag from. That's the real source of Isru Chag. The Halacha in Shulchan Aruch only talks really about Isru Chag for Shavuos, brought down in, there's no really Hilchas Shavuos, it's the last Siman in Hilchas Pesach, that the day after Shavuos you don't fast, it's called Isru Chag. The Mefarshim bring down, the Mishnah Berurah quotes them, because Bisman Beis HaMikdash Kaim, if Shavuos was Shabbos, all the karbonos of the individuals would have to be brought on Sunday, so the day after Shavuos is called Isru Chag. Is there such thing as called Isru Chag Sukkos, Isru Chag Pesach? You didn't have such a problem. But the Poskim say there's an Isru Chag Pesach and Isru Chag Sukkos as well, but the daddy of all Isru Chags is the day after Shavuos. On top of that, the 6 days after Shavuos have a separate reason, not called Isru Chag. We don't say Tachanun because the karbonos could be brought for 6 days because you couldn't get them in on one day. Okay. Now there's a lot of things that happen on Shavuos. It's hard to keep track of them. First of all, if you stay up the whole night and learn, you're going to spend a good portion of the next day in bed with your family screaming at you to get up so they can eat. And then you have a couple of hours to figure out exactly when your coherence comes back. You have a couple hours to figure out exactly what Shavuos is, and then you have all these things going on. You don't know what to concentrate on first. It's Matan Torah, but it's not the day of Kabbalah Luchas for the 1,000th time, right? We all know that. We accomplished that. There are no Luchas on Shavuos. Moshe Rabbeinu and Klal Yisrael stood around Har Sinai. Moshe Rabbeinu was up on Har Sinai. Klal Yisrael stood around Har Sinai, and they heard Hashem say, Anochi v'lo yeh. Moshe Rabbeinu said the last 8 dibros. Then Hashem said, come up for 40 days and 40 nights. I'll give you luchas. Moshe Rabbeinu came down on Shiva B'Tammuz. He saw the egel and he broke the luchas. There's no luchas on Shavuos. We get this luchas on Shavuos because when we were little kids, we drew pictures with 2 tablets on top of a mountain for Shavuos. Our children and grandchildren still come home with those pictures and projects. And every year, I did it this year, I explained to my grandchildren who were with me, my wife, we explained to them that it's very nice projects. They set up the projects on our Shavuos table so we can look at it. All of them have luchas on it. We explained to them, it's all right, that's what you do, but the luchas are not Shavuos. And then we have
some. The luchos represents Torah, so therefore, then they look at it.
That's all the luchos are. The 10 Commandments inscribed on stone. The 10 Commandments we heard on Shavuos, and not Shavuos. Maimed Har Sinai. The luchos are Shivasa B'Tammuz. They got broken the same day, and then there came a second one on Yom Kippur. There are all kinds of things going on, things that we have now long forgotten about because of different things that happen. It says in Shulchan Aruch that you should put in shuls, people did in houses, you should put up a tree in your house. Bring a tree in from the garden, in a pot, not just grass. Grass we hang up and flowers we hang up to remember Har Sinai that had grass around it. You're supposed to put a tree in your house and a tree in the shul. Why? It's a Mishnah. It says the world is judged 4 times a year. On Pesach, Hashem judges the world for the grain in the field, how well it will grow. On Shavuos, Hashem judges the fruits of the tree, how well they will grow. On Sukkot, Hashem judges the world for how much water will come, how much rain will come. And Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, HaKadosh Baruch Hu judges mankind. It's a Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah. Therefore, it became a minig, it brought down in Shulchan Aruch, to have a tree in your house on Shavuos. So you can remember that part of this day is not only Matan Torah, it's also a Yom Hadin. Today, God's going to judge how much fruits will grow. And that's why we had a tree in our houses, to remember that it's a Yom Hadin. The Avud Ram, it's a sefer called Avud Ram, he's a Rishon, and he wrote a Perish on the Siddur, and he asked a simple question. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we say Hashem, Hashem, Kal Racham V'chan Erech Apayim, we take out the Sefer Torah. Why? Because it's a Yom Hadin. The Yom Hadin, we say the 13 attributes, quote unquote, of Rachamim. Hashem, Hashem, Kal Racham V'chan. Why, when we take out a Sefer Torah on Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuos, do you give a Midah Shel Rachamim? It's not a Yom Hadin. So Avud Ram says it's a Yom Hadin. The Mishnah says man is judged Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. You say Hashem, 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 Kel Racham V'chanun. Pesach, the world's being judged about grain, Yom Hadin. Shavuos, the world's being judged about the fruits of the tree. It's a Yom Hadin. Sukkot, the world's being judged for how much rain will come. It's a Yom Hadin. And every Yom Hadin, you're asking for God's Rachmanis, Hashem, Hashem, Kel Racham V'chanun. But we lost that. Why have we lost that? This is not a blame game. It just became a minig. The Gra in Shulchan Aruch writes, the Mishnah Berurah brings it down, nobody should put trees in their houses anymore because that's what Goyim do. Okay?
Was he referring to Christmas? Referring to Christmas?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't say Christmas, but he says it's a chayk la'amim to put a tree in their houses on their yontif. So therefore, we don't put a tree in our houses. So, if the Gra lived, let's say he died in 1790, 1890, 19, it's over 200 years that at some point people stopped using trees, and at some point people forgot that it's like a manishtana, right? Your kid would come over to you and say, Abba, why did mommy buy a potted tree to put in the house today? Oh, good question. Because it's a Yom Hadin for Peres Elon. Right? We don't do that anymore because the Goyim robbed us of it. If they put Christmas trees in, we don't put Lahavdil Shavuos trees in. Year Mashiyah, I was very excited this year. I'm not sure. Last year I wouldn't remember because last year I didn't daven in a shul last year Shavuos, so I don't remember. And 2 years ago, I'm so old that I don't remember 2 years ago anymore. So last year I can't remember because it was Corona. 2 years ago I don't remember because I'm too old. But I was very, very happy. I went to Eish Kodesh to daven on Shavuos, and they had 2 trees, one on each side of the Aron Kodesh. and the minig, to a certain extent, may be coming back. And Baruch Hashem, there's no reason for us here not to have a tree in our houses on Shavuos. Baruch Hashem, we're not walking around Vilna where all the drunk vodka goyim have Christmas trees in their house. So Baruch Hashem, we're living in a different place, and we should be zeicher to have that minig back. So that's one of the things that got lost for whatever reason. An interesting fact is that the Torah, the Rabbanu Shalom says that you blow shofar on the first day of the 7th month. Very clear. It says on the 10th day of the 7th month, V'inisem es nafshi seichem, which we interpret to mean fast. The Rabbanu Shalom says on the 15th day of the 7th month, you sit in a sukkah. The Rabbanu Shalom says on the 15th day of the 7th month, you take the 4 minim. The Rabbanu Shalom says on the 14th day of the first month, you bring a korban pesach. The Baruch Shalom says on the 15th day of the first month, you have Pesach and no chametz. There's no pasuk in the Torah that says when Shavuos is. That's all the Torah says is count 49, really, the Torah says 50. Count 50 days from Mimachras HaShabbos, the day after Pesach, not the day after the last day of Pesach, the night after the Seder. The night after the Seder, the first night Chol HaMoed, start counting 50 days later it's Shavuos. Okay? Now let's think about this. The Beis HaMikdash is standing, and the only way you can declare a new month is if 2 witnesses come to the Sanhedrin, the Beis Din, and they say, we saw the new moon last night, and the Beis Din checks them out, and they say, it's Rosh Chodesh. Okay. A Jewish month can have 29 or 30 days. A Goyish month, 30 or 31. A Jewish month is only 29 or 30. Okay? And this is possible in every single month. It could be 29, it could be 30. It all depends when the witnesses come. Okay. It's Pesach. All right. Now it's going to be Iyar. Rosh Chodesh Iyar. When's Rosh Chodesh Iyar? Was Nisan 29 days or was Nisan 30 days? Depends when the witnesses came. So we don't know how many days, right? We don't know how many days Nisan is going to be. Nisan could be 29 and Nisan could be 30. Okay. Now we move forward and it's Iyar. We come to the end of Iyar. How many days will Iyar be? 29 or 30? And now we come to Shavuos. We don't know when Shavuos is. Any given year, Shavuos could be on a different day. If Nisan and Iyar are both 30 days, then Shavuos is going to be earlier, right? If Nisan and Iyar are both 29 days, then Shavuos is going to be later. Shavuos has no day. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says Shavuos can sometimes be, I think the Gemara says, the 4th day of Sivan, the 5th day of Sivan, or the 6th day of Sivan. Because maybe Nisan and Iyar are both 29. Maybe Nisan and Iyar are both 30. And maybe one is 29 and one is 30. So the possibility of when Shavuos is threefold. It is not a set day. It depends upon Kiddush HaChodesh. Okay, that's just a little trivia about Shavuos. Today we have the set calendar from Hillel, not Hillel Hanossi, but a great grandson, Mashu Kazeh, who set up a calendar for us. Okay. Having said that, that's where we are about Isru Chag and about the 6 days after Shavuos. Before we begin Shir, so I don't forget, Mishaberach Havosein Avram Mitzav Yaakov Uyavorach Es Chayalei Tzva Ganoli Yisrael Hoim Dema Mishmar Atzenu Borei Eloheinu Mikvul HaLavanon Vad Midbar Mitzrayim Min Yom HaGadol Ad Lavo HaRavo B'Yabashah B'Avir Hayom Yitein Adonai Yisraveinu Hakom Molein Gafel Lefneim Kadosh Baruch Hu Yishmor V'Yatzil Es Chayaleinu Mikol Tzor V'Tzukah Mikol Negel Machla V'Yishlach Bracha V'Atzlach B'Chol Ma'aseh Yedeihem Yad Ber So'enu Tachteim V'Atreim B'Ches Yeshua V'Teres Nitzachon V'Kuyam B'Hem HaKasuv Ki Adonai Lehechem Ha'olechim Mochem Lilachem Lachem U'Moivechem Lo Shir Eschem V'Nomar Amen. And if you're still davening in a shul that doesn't say that, we're not getting into politics now about Medinas Yisrael. If you're still davening in a shul that doesn't say the Tefillah V'chayalim, reconsider why you're davening there, try to figure it out, or ask the Rav, what is the problem for making a Bisha Berach for soldiers who are protecting us? After all, when we get $1 million donation to the shul from someone who's Machal Shabbos and Chutzlars, he gets sick, we're more than happy to make a Misha Berach for him. Why? Because he gave money to the shul, but he's not showing the Torah mitzvahs, but it's okay, he money to the shul. Okay, so think about exactly why you're davening in that shul, or build up the courage to maybe approach the rabbi and say, can I have a svara other than, my Rebbe didn't do it. Can I have a svara why we don't know Hakaras Hatoi for the soldiers who continue to put their lives on the line so that we can do all the good things we do. We do a lot of good things here. We learn Torah, we do mitzvahs, we're going to keep Shemitah, we do a lot of good things here, but it wouldn't happen without the physical safety of the soldiers. With the Siyata D'Shma Kadosh Baruch Hu gives them. And anybody that has any doubt about the need to keep yourself safe, and the fact that Jews, I understand, we talked about where, I understand we an Am Segula. We read this on Shavuos. We're an Am Segula. People have misinterpreted that today to mean that we have a lot of Segulas. We wear amulets, and we stand on our heads, and we daven 40 days and 40 nights over here, and we pay $36 for someone else to daven for us 40 days and 40 nights over there. And I bought for $36 a piece of wood in the RBS Views that some guy picked, and I'm not joking, somebody picked wood off a tree next to Rabbi Nachman in Uman. So we have, if you want $36, whatever it is, you get a piece of Uman. Imagine Ukrainian wood you can have in your house. Eza Skula. So people have misinterpreted Segula to mean we're a nation of Skulas. Skulis, the Rashi says, is a oitzer. We're God's treasure. And treasures are put in a place where they're protected. So we are obviously protected by the Rebbeinu Shalom. But as much as we're protected by the Rebbeinu Shalom says, you got to protect yourselves for me to protect you. You can't throw your hands up in the sky and say, everything is good. It's a mitzvah, it's Torah. Unfortunately, we have enough examples. There was a tremendous amount of Simchas Erev Yontif and all that going on in Karlin. And Karlin were very, very strict during Corona. The Rebbe was incredibly strict about the rules of Corona. But we all saw pictures of how those bleachers were put together. The pictures were taken by the police. There were 2x4s with this. They were held together with, what do you call those things? The cable ties. And because nothing can go wrong. It's in a shul, it's a Simchas Mitzvah, it's a this, it's a that. And nothing can go wrong by the Rashbi, because we're all dancing for the Rashbi. And we're going to blame it on the police, we're going to blame it on 100 different things, but we're not going to look at ourselves and say maybe physical safety is something we need to be concerned about. The Torah is the Torah, and the Rebbeinu Shalom is the Rebbeinu Shalom, and the Rebbeinu Shalom tells us in the Torah that we have to be worried about our physical safety. And part of being concerned about physical safety is making sure that we have soldiers here that are protecting us with the Siyat D'Shmaya. Okay. This week's Parshat we're going to open in the time we have remaining. We'll see how much we can do. But it's dedicated to Harabayas. Okay? What does that mean, Harabayas? That means that people that are listening to me, half of them will walk out. And those people who are listening to me till now will cut off the video. That's okay. There's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing you can do about people not wanting to listen. There's a pasuk in the Navi that says, "L'man Tzion lo echsher, l'man Yerushalayim lo eshkot." For the sake of Tzion, I will never remain silent, and I will always raise my voice. It's a pasuk in the Navi. We're living now in a matzif that was easily detectable a long time ago, and I spoke about it at Eish Kodesh years ago, that if we keep on the current attitude of the Harabayas, that the Rebbeinu Shalom, who gave us the gift of the Harabayas, and apparently we took the keys and gave back the gift, and if the attitude continues that way, that the Ribono Shel Olam is going to say, okay, if you don't want it, you don't want it, so we'll give it to somebody else. And at that day, everybody is going to cry and say, how can you do that? How can you give it away? And I'm sure a lot of people say it's not a problem for us. So today we're going to dedicate the Shir to the Shmira of the Jewish people and the Shmira of the Har HaBayis. Parakeh, Pasuk Aleph. Vaydav Hashem al Moshe Lema, Tzaves b'nei Yisrael, V'yishalchu min ha'machne kol tzarua v'chol zav v'chol tamei l'nafesh. We have the Parsha of Shiluach Machanois. If a person is ritually impure, he has to be sent out from the Jewish camp. We don't know what that means until we see Rashi who quotes the Gemara in Pesachim. We don't know what Tumah we're talking about. We don't know what camp we're talking about. And so Rashi explains everything we need to know. V'shalchu min ha'machane. Shalosh machanois hayu sham b'soch b'shas chaniyasam. The Jewish people were encamped in something called a machane, a camp. And there are 3 Jewish camps. We're now talking about in the Midbar, in the desert. These 3 camps will later be transferred to Yerushalayim. These are the 3 camps of the desert. We know that the Mishkan was made out of curtains. There were curtains around the Mishkan, and the Mishkan had a courtyard in it in which there was a Mizbeach, and then there were additional curtains in which there was the Aron, the Menorah, the Shulchan. But the Mishkan was a structure that had no bricks, had nothing to it except curtains surrounding it. Inside those curtains is called Machane Shechina. That's the Machane of Shechina that has the highest Kedusha. Chaniyas Halaviyim Saviv. There's a certain area around the curtains of the Mishkan, which is camp number 2. That's called Machane Leviah, the camp of the Leviah. In last week's Parsha, the Torah explained that Kahas will be here, and Gershom will be here, and Merari will be here, and Moshe, Aaron, Ubanav will be here. There were camps set up around the curtains. Those camps have a lesser Kedusha, and they are called Machane Leviah. Umisham vatsoif machne hadagolam l'chol arba haruchos hi machne Yisrael. And once you get further out, whatever the distance is, and the machne Leviah is done, the Leviim who live around the Mishkan, from that point in all 4 directions we have the 4 flags that we learned about in last week's Parsha. 3 Shvatim encamped around the flag, 3 to the north, 3 to the south, 3 to the west, 3 to the east. And that's called the Machne Yisrael. And that has the least Kedusha. So if we're going from outside in, we have the Machne Yisrael on the outside, Machne Leviim in, and in the center of it all, Machne Shechina, the Mishkan. This is transferred now by Chazal to Yerushalayim. Inside the wall of Yerushalayim is called Machane Yisrael. Walking on the Har HaBayis until you get to a certain point is called Machane Leviah. Once you get inside a specific point on the Har HaBayis, it's now called Machane Shechina. So if you look at your handout, on the second page of your handout, you need to have a different view of what's happening here. Our view is always from the coastal Maravi, from west to east. We're at the coastal Maravi, and we're looking at Har HaZeisim, which is east. That is not the correct way to look at these things. The correct way to look at these things is standing on Har HaZeisim and looking east to west. So this picture is showing you that. The entrance that you're looking at is the eastern gate, which is called Shushan Habira. Okay. This outer wall is the wall of the Har HaBayis, which means anything outside this wall until the wall of Yerushalayim, between the wall of Yerushalayim and the wall of the Har HaBayis, you are in Machane Yisrael. Once you enter the Har HaBayis, this area, this whole open area is called Machane Leviah. For our purposes today, if you look at the picture, it looks like there's a white area around the Beis HaMikdash itself with a little fence. That area, the fence is called the Sorag, and the area is called the Chel. Okay, for our purposes, that's already Beis HaMikdash territory, and it has, for us, the Chumrah of Machane Shechina. The Beis HaMikdash is Machane Shechina, just like the Mishkan was Machane Shechina. Around the Mishkan was Machane Leviah. Around the Beis HaMikdash, inside the wall of the Har HaBayis, is Machane Leviah. Outside the wall of the Har HaBayis until the wall of Yerushalayim is Machane Yisrael. Now, Rashi tells us the rules. Now, whatever rules Rashi is going to say about the three machanos in the Midbar are true for the three machanos in Yerushalayim. This pasuk says, send out from the camp someone that's tamei. Rashi now says, Hatzarua nishtala chutz l'kulan. Someone that was a Metzora had to be sent out of all three camps. Bodad yeshev mechutz lamachane. A Tzarua has to leave Machane Shechina, Machane Leviah. He can't even be a Machane Yisrael. He leaves the whole Jewish camp. So, if there was Lo Yaleinu a Tzarua, he couldn't be inside the city of Yerushalayim, or walled cities, but he couldn't be inside the city of Yerushalayim. Hazav, muta b'machne Yisrael u'mashulach min hashtayim. Hazav, not sure how they define zav today as a medical condition. Some of them call it okay, some of them call it. Forgot the name. Okay. What? That would be more about Kerry. A zav, I think some define today as a person that has lo yaleinu syphilis, gonorrhea. Hazav muta b'machne Yisrael. A zav can be in the city of Yerushalayim because that's Machne Yisrael. Umashulach min hashtayim, but he can't be in the other two. He can't enter the Har HaBayis. He certainly can't enter the Beis HaMikdash. V'tomei lanefesh. Someone that is tomei lanefesh. He came into contact with a dead body. Mutter af b'shel Leviah. He can even go into Machane Leviah, which means that someone that has come into contact with a dead body can be in the city of Yerushalayim, and he can even walk on the Har HaBayis. The only place he can't go is he can't enter the Beis HaMikdash, and any place that has the Chumrah of the Beis HaMikdash. But Har HaBayis is Machane Leviah, and there's no Issa for a Tomei Mace to be on the Machane Leviah. So the first thing we're going to debunk here, as we always debunk, this is the thing that goes around, no one's allowed to go on the Har HaBayis because we're all Tomei Mace. Okay? So that means that your mamish didn't learn a pasuk, you didn't learn a Rashi, unless someone say that the Rashi is not the way we paskin, so it's a Gemara in Pesachim, it's a Ram Hilchos Beis Abchira in Perek Zayin. Absolute halacha that someone that came into contact with a dead body can be in Machane Leviah, which means Har HaBayis. Now, how do we know that? Simple. Machane Leviah today is the Har HaBayis. What was the Machane Leviah in the time of the Mishkan? Where the Leviim lived. Who lived there with them? Moshe. And what was Moshe carrying with him the whole time? The Aron with Yosef's bones in it. So the we're not talking about someone that's we're talking about the dead body itself is in Machna Leviah. And today's Machna Leviah is the Harabayas. So a Tomei Mes is allowed to be on the Harabayas. No issue whatsoever. Okay. Then there are issues people say about Zov and people say about Balkari. Okay. Everything can be dealt with, but we need to debunk that first thing. We don't have a Pora Aduma today. And if you're Tomei Mes, you can't go up there, so then you're in Amma Oretz. Okay? You're Stam in Amma Oretz. They say, but we don't know where the Beis HaMikdash is. So maybe, okay. So if anybody knows anything about the topography of the Harabayas, this is not a picture to scale, but from the Mishnah in Talmud, from Mishnah Midas, we know there's a world of empty space on the Harabayas that the Beis HaMikdash didn't occupy. A world of space, depending what side you're on. But there's a world of space in different areas that the Beis HaMikdash never even came close to. Okay. Rashi says all this is learned out by Chazal in a Gemara in Psachim. Okay. So on the first page of your handout, we'll learn quickly. Din Shmira. We learned this when we're doing Zoom. We learned Masech Namidas, and we did a Meir Siyam, Masech Namidas, Masech Tamid, Masech Shkalim. We'll learn the first Mishnah. A couple of minutes, we'll learn the first Mishnah, and it should help us have an appreciation for the Beis HaMikdash, for the Harabayas, and to understand that it wasn't a mistake. What happened in 1967 wasn't a mistake. God doesn't make mistakes. And the other word that's used is, it's an Nasoyan. God gave us Eretz Yisrael, and God gave us the Harabayas in 67. He wanted to test us to see if we would stay away from it. Okay. That's a very, very, very shocking test. It's like 2,000 years we were staying away from it. And suddenly in 1967, the Rebbe Shalom said, I'm going to give it to you. I want to see if you can still stay away from it. The people have their narratives, and no matter what's going to happen, and this is lahavdil v'yas crystal tzach yidol tzach. We see this mamish in the media. People can't disassociate themselves from the way they see the world, and everything the way they see the world, no matter how much the world will change, it's the same thing. There's no such thing as it's not the same situation. People who are against something, it's very hard for them to say, you know what, the situation's changed. Nobody has to ever admit they're wrong. But we're humans, and history changes every second because God says, I'm changing history. But as history changes, people feel that they have to stay exactly the way it was because that's the way it was. If that's the way it was, that's the way it will be. Until Yirmiyahu, Yecheskel, Yeshaya come and say something's going to change. Until a Navi tells me otherwise, everything's the same, even though nothing's the same. So we have this word that's called today narrative, right? The narrative. People have a story that they've been telling, and no matter what's out there in the news, doesn't make a difference, it fits into my narrative. I'm an anti-Semite, I've been an anti-Israel for 50 years. And no matter what happens, it's the fault of a Jew and it's the fault of Israel. It's not. You see, it's mamish not. But that's my story. It's my story for 50 years. And I'm not going to change my story now. Trump. I didn't like Trump. If my chocolate milk fell around my pants, Trump. Anything that went wrong in life, it'd be Trump. Why? Because that's my narrative. Everything that goes wrong is Trump. It has nothing to do with the chocolate milk. Yeah, but everything goes wrong is Trump. It's like an environmental thing. Anything goes wrong is Trump. And people can't get past their narratives. Things do change. There was a sefer written called Mishkanais L'Aver Yaakov. It's, I believe, 3 thick volumes. I don't have it, but it's 3 thick volumes. I think it's out of print. It was written by Reb Hillel Gelbstein, Zechron Tzadik Levracha, about 1880. And he was a Kotzker Chassid, of the Polish Chassid. And he wrote a Pirush on all the Masechta Midas. And in 1880, he started getting Gedolim, trying to get Gedolim together to start Shmiras HaMikdash. And that's what the first Mishnah we'll read quickly now talks about. There's a Chiyuv D'Oraisa to guard the Beis HaMikdash. Not to guard the Beis HaMikdash because we're worried somebody will come in and steal things, but because it's God's palace. And a palace, in Britain, every palace, right? They have the guys that can't smile with their big hats, right? Why? Because it's a palace. It has guards. Why are these guys standing there like this? What, they're scared someone's going to come into the palace and steal something? If somebody can get through that gate, he'd be dead because he'd be shot by the real guards. So why do these guys stand? It's a covet for a palace to have guards. So the covet Beis HaMikdash to have guards. And he tried to reinstitute guards. Not that you can go into the Har HaBayis, but part of the guards that the Mishnah talks about are outside the Har HaBayis. And his position was that the mitzvah of Shmiras HaMakom has nothing to do with the Beis HaMikdash. Even the Beis HaMikdash is not here. It's a place that requires Shmira. We learned the Rambam. The Rambam holds that the Kedusha Shechina is in Yerushalayim forever. It never left Yerushalayim. So let's read the first Mishnah, and Rav Gelbstein writes in the Sefer. We're going to come to the Parsha in a couple of weeks, but Mashiach Tzidkenu, Parshas Koirach. There was a terrible Magefa, and 15,000 or so Jews died. And after the Magefa are the Psukim from which we learn out Shmiras HaMikdash. And he writes in the Sefer that learning Hilcha Shmiras HaMikdash, we're Segula people, right? Okay, here's a real Segula. It has nothing to do with Uman wood. It has to do with learning. A real Segula, to protect yourselves and have a Shmira, is to learn about Shmiras Beis HaMikdash. Because when there was a Magefa, after the Magefa, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us it's a mitzvah to watch the Beis HaMikdash. That watching of the Beis HaMikdash also watches over us. Mishnah Aleph, Midas, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph. B'shloishim HaKoymes HaKohanim Shem Beis HaMikdash. In 3 places the Kohanim watch the Beis HaMikdash. Bebeis Haftinas, Bebeis HaNitzutz, Bebeis HaMoikei. 3 different places. You have a picture, take it home with you, show it to your wife, show it to your children, show it to your grandchildren. The last page of your handout is a picture of the Har HaBayis and the Beis HaMikdash, and it shows you every single place. There's a circle, Levi, Levi, Kohen, Levi. It shows you every single place where there was a shomer. There were 24 shomerim, 3 Kohanim, and 21 Leviim. V'alavim be'esav echad mokem, chamisha shari Har HaBayis, arba al arba pinoisem mitoicha, chamisha shari azor, arba al arba pinoisem achutz, ve'echad b'lishkas hakod, ve'echad b'lishkas haparechas, ve'echad lachori beis hakapayis. So 24 places that the Beis HaMikdash was watched, 3 places Kohanim, 21 places by Levim, and an interesting halacha, wherever a Kohen watched, there was a Levi there with him. Because there's a mitzvah in the Torah of Vilavecha Alecha Visharsucha. The Leviim are there to help the Kohanim. So there are 21 places where Leviim watched by themselves. There are 3 places where only Kohanim watched. But those 3 places that only Kohanim watched, there was a Levi there only for the purpose of assisting the Kohen. There are 3 Kohanim places, 21 Levi places, and Levites were also assistants to the Kohen in their 3 places. The Shmiras HaMikdash should be the Shmira for Klal Yisrael, and the Shmira of Klal Yisrael should be the Shmira of the Beis HaMikdash. Everyone have a wonderful Shabbos.